A millionaire hears a homeless boy say, "Your child is still alive." What happened next shocked him. The pristine White House stood silently at the end of the long driveway. Once it was filled with laughter and life, but today the only sound was the soft creak of the wooden porch steps as Aleksandar Porter sank onto them with slumped shoulders and trembling hands. He was wearing a light pink shirt and black pants, but his eyes were sunken, drowned in sorrow. He hadn't slept for days. In front of him, on the porch, rested a small, shiny wooden coffin, open. Inside it, wrapped in a faded blanket, it was the body of his little infant son, the child he was supposed to save, the child who had cost him everything. Aleksandar was only 33 years old, but he had built one of the biggest real estate companies in the city and had become rich, but none of that mattered to him anymore, not now. 3 days ago, his beautiful wife Clara went into labor. It was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives. He had waited years for this child. After 2 miscarriages and endless tears, this was finally going to be their miracle. But something happened. A mistake. Serious childbirth complications. Aleksandar paced the hospital hall until the doctor appeared. His expression said it all. "I'm sorry, Mr. Porter," the doctor said softly. "Your wife didn't make it." The words shattered him. His knees buckled in the hallway. "And the baby?" he asked in a choked voice. The doctor hesitated, then shook his head. "He was alive, but only for a few moments. We did everything we could." The funeral arrangements felt like a nightmare. Aleksandar couldn't bear the thought of his son being in a cold funeral home or strangers handling his son's body. He told the staff, "I want him here at home one last time." Now, on the balcony, Aleksandar sat motionless, alone. His wife was gone, his son was gone, he had no one left. He stared at the small, still body. His world had collapsed. What's the point of business deals, properties, and millions? Without his wife and the child he dreamed of, all of it was meaningless. Aleksandar didn't notice the little boy approaching the balcony. A small black boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, barefoot, skinny, wearing an oversized dirty blue shirt and worn-out brown shorts. His skin was dirty and his arms and legs were scratched. A homeless child. The boy had wandered beside the big house, drawn by the sight of the open coffin on the balcony. At first he stood at a distance, watching quietly. Then he came closer, his eyes wide. He could see the child inside, so small and very quiet, but something made him stop here. The child's chest moved, the boy blinked, rubbed his eyes and stared more intently. He saw a faint breath, saw a flutter under the blanket, looked at the man on the steps and said to him, "Sir," he didn't reply. "Aleksandar." He sat frozen, immersed in his sorrow. The boy came closer, now pointing at the child. "Sir, your child, he's alive." Aleksandar raised his head suddenly. His sunken eyes narrowed, and he said,
"What?"
The boy pointed again, more urgently. "I saw him move. He's breathing." Aleksandar's heart pounded in his chest as he said, "No, surely not," the doctor said. But something in the boy's voice, those desperate eyes made him turn, jump up, and stumble to the coffin. He bent down, held his breath, stared at his son's body, and saw it. The faintest rise and fall in the chest, barely there, but it was there. Aleksandar's throat tightened, his hand trembled violently as he reached out, touching with his fingertips. The child's cheek was warm, soft, not cold, not dead. Aleksandar gasped and staggered back, his mind scattered. The doctors said dead. They signed the papers, but the boy, this child, this homeless boy, saw the truth. He searched for his phone desperately, adrenaline rushing through his veins, called the emergency line, shouted, "A living child! Send help! I need an ambulance now! He's alive!" His legs almost gave out as he clung to the edge of the balcony, his breath ragged. The boy stood silently watching him. After a moment, Aleksandar turned to him, his eyes wet, and they were a weapon. You saved my son." Deep inside him, something changed. A spark of hope, a spark of life piercing the darkness. Aleksandar stood frozen, his heart pounding hard, his mind wildly scattered, as the sirens began to wail in the distance. The boy, this little stranger who had just saved his son, stood quietly near the balcony, watching with wide eyes. Minutes later, paramedics rushed upstairs. Aleksandar met them at the door, his voice shaking. He's alive, please save him. They quickly assessed the newborn, administered oxygen, and detected the baby's weak pulse. One of the paramedics said sharply, "There's no time to waste. We have to take him to the hospital now." Aleksandar got into the ambulance, and his hand never let go of the baby's tiny hand. His world, which just moments ago was shrouded in despair, was now flooded with a terrifying hope. As they sped through the city, Aleksandar looked at his son and said, "Hold on, my little one." They quickly assessed the newborn, administered oxygen, and detected the baby's weak pulse. One of the paramedics said sharply, "There's no time to waste. We need to get him to the hospital now." Aleksandar got into the ambulance, never letting go of the baby's tiny hand. His world, which moments ago was filled with despair, was now flooded with a terrifying hope. As they sped through the city, Aleksandar looked at his son and said, "Hold on, my little one. Please hold on to life." At the hospital, a team of specialists was waiting for the baby. They took over his case as soon as he arrived. Machines were beeping. Doctors and nurses moved with precision. Aleksandar stood nearby, his fists clenched, barely breathing. Time passed slowly. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the doctor approached him and said, "Mr. Porter, your son was in a very weak condition, but he is now stable. He will survive." Aleksandar collapsed onto a chair, his head in his hands, crying. "My son." When he finally raised his head, he thought of the boy who saved his son. Aleksandar rushed back home. The paramedics had left and no crowd had gathered, but the homeless boy was still there, sitting quietly on the porch steps. Aleksandar knelt and softly asked, "What's your name?" The child whispered, "Eli." Aleksandar asked him, his voice choked, "Eli, how did you know he was alive?" Eli said simply, "I saw him move. I knew he wasn't dead." Aleksandar's eyes filled with tears again. He looked at the boy. He was thin, barefoot, his clothes were torn, his face smeared with dirt. He asked him, "Where is your family, Eli?" The boy looked down. "I don't have a family. I sleep here. Sometimes people don't notice me." Aleksandar tightened his grip, this boy. The world ignores him, forgotten, yet he saved his son's life, Aleksandar said quietly. "You saved him. I can never repay you, but I can make sure you won't be alone again." He stood, extended his hand, and spoke to him. "Come with me." He stared at me for a moment, unsure, then slowly reached out his hand and held on. That night, after talking to the authorities and child welfare services, Aleksandar brought Eli home, gave him a warm meal, a hot bath, and clean clothes, things Eli hadn't had in longer than he could remember. The next morning, Aleksandar returned to the hospital. His son, whom he named Benjamin, was recovering well. He held the little boy close to his heart, tears falling freely, and whispered to him as he pointed to Eli, "You're here because of him." Later that day, he sat with Eli in the hospital room and said to him, "Eli, I want you to stay with us if you'll let me." The boy looked up, his eyes shining with hope. "Do you mean you want me to live in your house?" Aleksandar said firmly, "Yes, you saved my son. You brought my soul back to me. You deserve a family." Over the weeks that followed, Aleksandar completed the legal procedures and officially adopted Eli. The man who lost everything now had not just one son, but 2 children. Together, they healed, and together, they rebuilt their lives in due time. Whenever asked about that day, Aleksandar would simply smile and say, "It was a little boy, a homeless boy, who gave me my life back." If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more emotional, dramatic, and unexpected stories. And tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching us from. We love your comments.